Good morning, everyone. My name is David Kreller. I'm an advisor with the Small Business Development Center at Wichita State University. I am joined today with Ryan Slinky, who is the owner of Reliant Merchant Services here in Wichita. They are a
Mhm.
merchant services provider, credit card services provider. And our topic today is PCI compliance. And PCI compliance has been around for more than a couple of years now, and it's
Yep.
evolving issue. There's been a lot of questions in our office asked about it. So we're here today to try to get some of that information. Thank you, Ryan, for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, this is a timely topic. We're recording this here in the fall of 2024, and we're getting close to the holiday season. A lot more credit card transactions gonna be happening.
That's right.
Uh,
hmm
tell us a little bit about what is PCI compliance and why is it important?
Yep. So, in the world of credit cards, you have MasterCard, Visa, American Express, Discover, Apple Card, Google Pay, all these things that everybody knows and hears and use. Um, but what about security? They decided a lot of these came together because they are all doing their own security things, making their networks very secure, making them, be encrypted and all the technical terms that we use for high level security stuff. But they realized that a lot of the individual merchants, the small businesses out there, they were not doing things very securely, which makes their image even look bad. So it's almost a perception thing. And so they came together in the early 2000s, around 2004, and they created a third party entity called PCI-DSS is the technical term, which stands for Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. So basically, what they wanted to do is create this standard that everybody follows, that hey, we're going to take these level of security when it comes to being compliant and being protecting people's card information. And so that's where PCI started. People look at it and they're like, well, why do I have this extra PCI compliance fee on my bill? And that's like, well, this is pointless. It's just another way for it's not. There's actually a reason for it. And it's very, very needed. And I appreciate it being there too, which is kind of a weird thing to say for a lot of people. But PCI compliance is very, very important to this world.
So in short, what it sounds like is it's really the standardization of security standards for credit card processing.
Correct. Yep. Yes, it is.
And we're dealing with, in this conversation, we're dealing with the merchant side, the acceptance of credit card payments, not the actual plastics that are out there.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Because there's some businesses out there that both receive payments by credit card, but they may have business, corporate credit cards or whatnot that
True.
their employees.
Correct. Yes.
This is on the
Yep.
receiving the payment side, if you will.
Correct. This is acquiring. So this is you go grabbing someone's money and bringing it into your business.
Gotcha. So it's been around
Mhm.
for about 10 years now, these standards, and help us understand what we need to know. As I've looked at it, there's some different websites. There is actually a PCI website, and you go through it, and as a Main Street merchant, you look at this 12 steps that you're supposed to go through, and it almost feels overwhelming. And I'm going to get to a subsequent question about your people's processors, but in
Right.
general terms, whether you're a large or small business alike, what do people generally need to know about this PCI compliance process?
Yeah, and the easiest way that I can explain it is not what the acronym is actually stands for, but the acronym that I try to live by, especially when I'm teaching people about PCI compliance, is I like to use protect consumer information.
That's good.
So if we are setting guidelines or procedures or standards for our staff, everybody that's involved, that's taking a card and running a transaction, all that in mind of protect consumers' information. So whether I'm writing it down or I'm actually inserting it, okay, when I insert it, is my machine correct? Like, is it doing the things that it's going to do to protect that person's information? Same thing with writing it down. Do I shred it? Do I burn it? What is your standard for getting rid of that so that you are protecting that person's information? And so when I think about the what you need to know, that's the easiest way to go to have that start in your mind. Because like you said, you're going to get online and you're going to do these big questionnaires that are going to be talking about network and what is your cybersecurity risk? What is your risk here? And everybody's just like, this doesn't make sense to me. If you have in your mind that you're going to do everything in your power to protect that person's information, you have a pretty good head start on being compliant right there.
So it sounds like there's really kind of two pieces to it. There's the credit card processor side, their equipment, their technology, and the compliance standards,
Correct.
whether it's encryption
Mhm.
or what are the things they require. But then there's the also part is what does the Main Street merchant, what are they needing to do in terms of, locking their file cabinets and training their staff and
Correct.
making sure
Correct.
people aren't looking over somebody's shoulder. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, this was set for that reason. Because like we talked earlier, uh, the big card brands, they're doing their part of it, and they realized there was this other piece of it where, okay, we're going to do everything in our power to protect, but what if they're not doing it? It's still, uh, you know, open for liability or fraud or whatever data breaches that you can think of. And so that's where they set the standard was, hey, we're going to do our part. Now you guys need to do your part, and we're going to work together to keep this network secure. Mhm.
So this questionnaire we referred to or you alluded to, it sounds a bit intimidating, and maybe that kind of leads me into
Can
the
be.
next question about small businesses. And
Mhm.
again, as I've read these standards, it appears a lot of them are really geared towards very large enterprises that are large and
Correct.
sophisticated, maybe have multiple locations. And so break
Correct.
this down as best you can for us for smaller merchants, Main Street merchants. What do they need to know? I guess maybe a two-part question. Do they need to go through the questionnaire themselves? And then secondly is maybe more importantly, what should they ask their credit card processor, assuming they're taking credit card payments now, or their
Correct.
prospective processor, if they're looking for somebody, what questions should they ask when evaluating to make sure they are PCI compliant?
Yeah, so I guess we said, there's two parts of it. There's the card brands and there's, the end merchant, but then there's also this middle of the road person of the actual technology, the machine that you're getting ready to put into your storefront where, you know, it just might be an old school card machine sitting on the counter and there's nothing fancy about it or a full-blown point of sale system. The big thing to remember though is when you're looking at those technologies or partner or provider, whoever, it's a simple question of, hey, is your stuff PCI compliant? Um, I tell people the quickest way you could figure that out is you go to their website and you scroll all the way to the bottom where you have your gloss or whatever, all this stuff underneath there. Usually there's a check mark that says PCI compliant. So that's a quick way to see who you're going to be working with. Are they PCI compliant? But then if you don't see that, start asking questions, hey, when I get this machine, is that machine going to be PCI compliant? If they can't give you a straight answer, I pretty easily assume that it's not, um, because the standards set, especially with those big technologies, whether it's a bank or a one-off point of sale system, like they need to be PCI compliant. They've got to do their part. And so, yeah, that's a pretty quick, easy question to ask them. Hey, is your stuff done that way? And then that second part is, are you going to teach me or show me how to be PCI compliant? Because like I said, we reference these questionnaires, like they don't understand these questions, but hopefully whoever they're working with does understand those questions and can walk them through that and help them become PCI compliant in their own right. So yeah, asking the questions, don't be afraid to ask, hey, are you PCI compliant? If that's a tough question for them to answer, then I probably wouldn't work with them. Um, so that's a pretty easy way to at least start anyway to getting on the path of being compliant.
So again, it sounds like there's almost two pieces to this. There's the piece of validating, whether it's calling them, checking their website, et cetera, to determine that the entity that you're working with, your merchant services, your credit card processor, that they
Correct.
themselves are PCI compliant. But then there's also the part of the merchant themselves, the small business themselves,
Correct.
are they PCI
Yes.
compliant? So will the processor, you alluded to the question of, will the processor help the merchant get compliant or not? Can you talk a little bit about what a Main Street merchant might expect to need to do or be expected to do for achieving PCI compliance.
Yeah, so and you alluded to this of like, those questionnaires are really
Yeah.
rote for big places. If you're pretty extravagant, you have a lot of systems in place, it's going to take you longer to go through those questionnaires. Um, but for the auto mechanic that just wants the old school terminal to sit on the counter and it's robust plastic and just does its work, it's going to be pretty simple to
Okay.
get PCI compliant. So that's where I start is try to identify their exposure points, right? So if they're having to write information down or they're taking card numbers over the phone, like, okay, is your phone secure? Like that,
Mm.
those kind of things. So that's where people get tripped up is they'll do a question and they'll answer it this way, and then it opens up this whole other world of questions. And so they get very overwhelmed. But again, going back to that acronym of protect consumer information, if you see that question and you're like, yeah, I'm doing some extravagant things, but these are the things we're doing to protect it, that's a pretty good head start. So yeah, I say hopefully whoever you're deciding to work with will at least have the patience to work with you in it, because I mean 99% of small businesses have never heard of PCI. Like it's very, they're just like, yeah, I'm PCI compliant. It's like, okay, have you done your questionnaire? And they're like, what's that? You know?
So,
So it's a big deal.
so this kind of leads to another question. I've had some folks approach me on this is, they'll get something from some company they're working with, or whether it's an accounting software platform or something that says, for a fee, we will make sure you're PCI compliant. But on the surface, it sounds like that's not the reality of the situation, that the merchant themselves still's got to take some steps, be it the questionnaire, a self-assessment, or something to validate their
Correct.
compliance. Is that fair?
That is, yes, that is actual. Yeah, that's factual.
Just throwing
Yes,
money
I
at it doesn't make the problem go away.
correct. And again, if they say they're going to take care of your PCI compliance, yes, the technology is done that way. But the moment you do something with the card outside of that technology, are you protected? And that's where a lot of people get tripped up is they haven't taken those steps. So if something happens and it's outside of that technology, you're not compliant or you're not
Yeah.
under their umbrella anymore. And so yeah, you might be paying for it and their top of the line equipment is what it says it's doing, it's PCI compliant. But if you step outside of that and do something that's outside of their technology, you can be liable.
It in real short order, last question I have is if somebody just throws caution to the wind and says, I don't have time for this, I'm not going to do it, what's the ramifications of failing to achieve PCI compliance? Is there fines and penalties? Is it a liability issue? What's the recourse? What's the kind of the outcome if you fail to achieve compliance?
Right. So I mean, it is definitely case by case, but liability is big. And these big companies that are creating these technologies, they don't want to be liable for fraud or data breaches or people's money being stolen. And so if it's traced back that even though you might have been doing the things correctly, but you haven't taken the actual steps to be PCI compliant in the like registered, and they know that you're PCI compliant, they're going to pass that liability onto you. And so,
Yeah.
and this is something that you need to do annually. I suggest talking to your merchant service provider and like, hey, it's been this long, I haven't done anything. Do I need to do something again?
Be proactive.
Because yeah, be proactive. Because I mean, especially, even if you have to pay an extra $10 a month to be PCI compliant and you're doing the steps and you have that done, think about if someone's card was stolen and say it was a transaction of $10,000. Who's liable for that? If it's traced back that you were PCI compliant, you were doing the steps, you did everything you were supposed to do, but they find someone else do it, well, now that liability is passed on to someone else. So I tell people it's like, hey, $10 a month. Think of insurance, Um, and that's why they created it as a third party. It wasn't to just make another dime for the card brands or people. PCI, you're not paying Visa that $10 for that PCI compliance. You're actually paying an entity that's keeping you secure. And so Yeah, it's very important, especially as a small business, because like I mean, I'm, a small business and I do my own accounting and sales and everything. And so this is just another step to do it, but it is a very vital step to keep your business going for the future.
Well, this is great information. Again, thank you so much for your time today. I've been joined with by Ryan Selinke. He is the owner of Reliant Merchant Services here in Wichita. Um, if you have questions, you can reach out to the SBDC. Our phone number is 316-978-3193. Again, my name is David Kreller, and thank you for joining us today.